I'd like to briefly introduce our panel of speakers this morning. Our topic today will be the title of one of Swamiji's books, Hope for a Better World, in which he speaks about the need for communities and, in his own words, takes on many of the big guns of Western philosophy. It's a fascinating topic, and we'll approach it from several different angles. Bharat Cornell will speak on Swamiji's Material Success Through Yoga Principles course. Bharat has been successful in a number of fields. Most particularly, he wrote a very famous and very well-known book called Sharing Nature with Children, which has been reprinted many, many times, first coming out in the 1970s, and he's traveled all over the world, literally, speaking to many, many thousands of people, and this has created really a whole movement of nature awareness. And as well, he is a Kriyacharya and has promoted the teachings and principles of meditation. So he will speak on material success and that aspect of our work, both with corporates and individually, and as well as lead us, I think, in some exercises.
Years ago, some friends of Swami from Italy, they came to visit the community, and they sent them out into the forest with Anandi and I. And when I pulled out this rope and the blindfolds, there, because they couldn't speak English, there was this look of horror on their face. Because hostage taking is a national sport of Italy. But we won't do anything like that today. Swamiji, as we all know, came to Master in 1948, and he came in the last years that Paramahansa Yogananda had on this earth. And Master trained Swami in his mission. And Master's mission was to enlighten the disciples' consciousness, but also it was a very broad mission, and that was to bring the principles of Dwapara Yuga more out into the world and create forms so that it would be more tangible and real to people's consciousness. And this has been really Swamiji's role in life. Also, Swami had a real strong feeling that he was Henry I, William the Conqueror's son, who came to really establish William's work after uniting the Western civilization. And so not too long ago, Swami wrote a series of lessons, The Material Success Through Yoga Principles, where he tells his secret, how he works to bring in a great avatar's mission out into the world. And this course is amazing. You know, we all have read about the principles of deep meditation and Kriya Yoga in terms of how to really attune ourselves inwardly. But we can't meditate all day long. It's not our karma. And we have a lot of hours with the rest of our day. And how can we live in God? How can we share in God? How can we bring in the great power of God into this world? You know, this is what this course teaches, and I'd like to share some of the main principles about this course. I remember reading an autobiography of a yogi where Babaji says that in a higher age, people prefer the shelter of trees. And being someone that loved nature, that always resonated with me. And it was a quality of consciousness that came to earth that allowed that to happen. And one of the major principles of this course is get centered and let the universe help you. And what happens when we get centered? We bring in all our awareness into ourself. We bring in all our resources, and our quality of life is determined by how much of energy we have brought into ourself. Swami said a pretty amazing thing. he said that outer events will adjust themselves to your inner control. And that because centered energy in the spine is stronger and more magnetic than scattered energy. I remember first coming at Ananda, and I think one of the things I've been accused of life is being a very enthusiastic person. And I was very excited about something. I just met Ananda a few months, and I came running up to tell Swamiji about it, and he just stayed very quiet in his spine. And I kind of walked away, kind of like, oh. And it just, we've all had that where we've come to someone who's been very centered, and we've just got into that flow of energy because of the depth of that centeredness. And, if high consciousness could change a whole planet in terms of we share, we live under the shelter of trees because nature's benign, just think what will happen when we bring our energy in together and how we can change just our local environment with that same approach. Daya Taylor, she was new in India, and she was seeing all the work that Swamiji was doing to try to launch our work there, and just so many things he was doing. And she's a very, very serviceful person and devoted to Swami, and she wanted to help Swamiji. And she said, "How can we help you, sir?" And Swami said, "Work with a calmness you feel in meditation." And if we have that calm, that poise, that means our energy is stronger, and it's more magnetic, and it's more intuitive. And just in our Swami wrote this course for all of us in our everyday situation, so that we can bring it. These attitudes and change our environment right around us, and he did it in so many creative ways. There was a special forces survival expert, and he was talking about people who get lost in survival situations, and he said what determines whether that person is going to come out of the forest whole and healthy is not their experience, is not any knowledge that they have. It's two things only. It's their poise and their positive attitude. You could take somebody who doesn't know anything, and they'll come out of the forest in much better shape than anybody else. I had two experiences. One helped me learn and approach a situation in a different way. When I was in Death Valley before I came to Ananda, I was hiking out in the desert, and I got quite a ways away, and the sun came down, and I couldn't get back to where I was, and I was staying with the chief naturalist, and I could see the lights of where their housing was, the staff housing was, but I knew I wasn't going to reach it till it got past dark. Well, I was a little bit embarrassed. Here I was staying with the chief naturalist of the national park, and I was going to be lost. Well, I wasn't really lost, but I just, wasn't going to be able to get home that night, and I didn't want people to be bothered by me. And but I was thinking outwardly, and so I thought, well, maybe I can beat the sun going down. And so I started running, and there was just a faint amount of light, and I just kept running. And I wasn't frightened, but I didn't want put people through the inconvenience of having to look for me. And so I was running, and then it got dark, and I could still see the lights, though. And I was running, and then all of a sudden I hit solid ground, and I stopped. And I couldn't see in front of me. And then I reached down, took a pebble, and threw it. And I counted 8 seconds before that pebble hit the ground. And it was a cliff. I did know my geology. And in this case, I guess knowledge did help. And so instead of running off the cliff, I slid down the cliff, and then I was able to make it in. But it made a strong impression on me in terms of what should I have done in that situation? Well, I should have looked at what was happening right around me and dealt with what I need to do, not what other people were thinking, and that they're going to have to interrupt their dinner to come and look for me, and the park's an awful big park and all that kind of stuff, but just be with what is. And I had another adventure that I was actually able to apply these principles. I was up near Donner Pass, and I was brought two Englishmen up, and the snow covered the ground, and so things looked totally different. And I gave them the map because I knew the area, but I took the wrong ridge down. And I started walking. It wasn't till I got well past where I started where I realized I wasn't going to make it to the car at night. But I remembered this experience, and I said, I'm just going to stay in my inner peace, sense of inner peace, and whatever happens is okay. I can crawl under the leaves as once I get down below the snow. It's okay. I remember the story or the saying of Daniel Boone. They asked him, "Have you ever been lost?" And he said, "No, I've never been lost. I've been a mite bewildered for a week or two, but never lost." I knew the freeway was California is not that big or wild a state. I knew I would hit the freeway at some point. So I just walked with Divine Mother coming down, and then I got right as it was getting dark, and there was a lake, and off in the distance in the lake there were some fishermen, and I was feeling really close to Divine Mother and very calm, and I didn't want to disturb that calmness by yelling for help or just to get attention of people across the lake. And so I just kept walking. I said, "Divine Mother, I'm just with you, and what happens, happens." And I kept on walking, and they started to pack up and leave, and then one had stayed behind, and there was a cove, and then it was just, maybe 50 feet across, and I could speak normally without having to yell. And I said, "What lake is this?" And they said, "Well, it's Lake Spalding." And then they went on, and I just didn't say anything. And my car at this time was 10 miles away, and it was almost pitch black. But it was okay. Honestly, I just hadn't always felt the joy that I was feeling, and that was more important than anything else. And so I walked around the cove, and in the darkness, as I was feeling my way with my feet, one of the young fishermen had stopped and said, "Well, why don't you know what lake it is?" And well, I'm not a dummy. So I said simply, "Well, my car's up at this other area, and I'm getting back to my car." I still wasn't going to say anything. And then he went and talked to his friends, and there was a little discussion about whether they should take me on the dirt roads for 10 miles. And I was just very happy and peaceful while they were going through whether they should or shouldn't. And then they did take me up there. And then when I got home, Anandi sort of woke up, and she said, "You're home." And I said, "Yes, I'm home." But I felt I never left home. And just that of being really connected. Frank Laubach, the great mystic, he said that he had one job in life, and that was to stay in tune with God. And he found that everything else flowed around him. And God is the universe, and when we're in touch with that, and when we see God as the only reality, that reality really comes into manifestation and really acts in this world. But that reality has to be honored. It can't, if it's ignored, then that presence of God just says, "I will wait." Another important principle in this course is creativity. I was doing a course in creativity here at the Expanding Light, and I was up in Seattle and visiting the East West bookstore there, and I wanted to see what was written in the field for creativity. I was just curious. And the best book I found that actually was useful, there really the extent of creativity was to stop sort of the mental process and help people to see things in a new way. And but it's just to stop your normal thinking, see it in a new way. And it said it's a little bit like natural selection, where you generate a lot of ideas and then you pick out the best ones afterwards. But that's still more the conscious level, isn't it? And Swami says that the secret to creativity is to raise the energy in the spine, because it's energy that awakens consciousness. And the higher the energy is centered in the spine, the more inspired the experience is. And so that when we use creativity that way, we know that there's a sense of revelation. There's a sense of perfection to it, in terms of it's just the perfect thing for this situation. And Swami, who is the master at creativity, as we all know, in every aspect of his life, whether it's talking to somebody, writing music, books. We know the story, most of us, of the writing the Bhagavad Gita. It was something he wanted to write for a long time, but he didn't have the original writings of Master. And how am I going to do this? And then he had, I think it was a dream, where Master said, "Don't discount the opportunity of a skylight." And then all of a sudden, Swami remembered the passages of the Bhagavad Gita, and in 2 months, he was able to write that 571-page book. And I don't think I could even type 571 pages, even if I was trying to copy something. Swami, in the lessons, talks about when he wrote the 9 pieces of music for Mediterranean Magic. He asked someone in the community, "How long do you think this took me to write the 9 songs and the melodies?" And that person said, "A week." And Swami said, "It took an hour, but I had to be utterly focused and concentrated." And all of us have aspirations. We've come in with a high sense of ideals, and we're really at the, just entering in Dwapara Yuga, and new forms are needed to be created in this world. That there are a few visionaries, but it's people who take a vision and manifest it so other people can see it and resonate with it, so it's concrete and tangible. That's what's needed in this world. And this is what Anand is doing, and so many other people around the planet. But this course and these principles is just a very clear, dynamic way of really drawing this inspiration and applying it in so many different situations. It's not just sort of a general sort of becoming centered that Swami teaches in this course, but how to write advertising joyfully and universally, the joy of business, how to work with others, how to be other people, and how to be an expanded consciousness. One thing that I like about this course, that Swami makes such a magnetic statement of the value of being expansive, that it's in our best interest to do so. He talks about how if we're contractive, we got tunnel vision, and our experience of life is just so small that we can't see anything besides the little vortex of energy that we're creating by just drawing everything to ourselves. But someone that's very expansive sees possibilities, and they're able to work with the larger flows of life. If someone is pulling the energy to themselves, how can other people really give their hearts to that person? The energy is blocked. And there's not a flow of this energy throughout the world. It's sort of hogged, so to speak, and what comes to us. And I remember this story I read about someone who, in the early 1900s, they visited the Grand Canyon for the first time. and they came out, and as many of you know, I think the Grand Canyon's 178 miles long and over a mile deep and maybe 20 miles wide, and they were just frightened by the immensity of the Grand Canyon, and so they crawled back on their knees, and they wrote in the guidebook, "This canyon's so damn big, I need a drink." And we could just, I mean, you could sit for hours and enjoy the immensity of the Grand Canyon. I have some friends that lead nature walks in the Santa Monica Mountains for urban children that haven't had any kind of experience in outdoors, and they say about 1 out of every 7 of the children will just stop and they'll see a field of flowers for the first time, or maybe the ocean, and they just are wrapped with one that they just can't believe it, and they just take it all in, and they just love the largeness of life. And in this course, Swami just over and over again just trains us to be big and expansive, and how we approach every field, every human interaction, so that we have that sense, so that we can stay in tune and not just meditate and then feel inspiration, then we get in the hearty give and take of life. It reminds me of this story of this colonel who was landing on his troops in D-Day, and he was in the first wave, and it was going to be very active day for him, and so his prayer to God was, "Lord, if I forget you, remember me." And I thought it was such a beautiful prayer, but with the tools that Swami has given us in this Material Success course, in so many ways to apply these principles, and to bring in a manifestation, the inspiration, we can stay in attunement and stay in the creative process and stay in the joy of expansion and of bringing high ideals into whatever we do, whether it's business, human interactions. There's one other point I wanted to make. I want to make sure that I have time for Dharmidas too. I would like to end with a meditation that Swami ended his course with. And it's a very powerful meditation. And it's so important to feel that God is the doer in our lives. And I want to read it to you, and it'll be done with your eyes sort of open and looking off in the expansiveness of the lake and the nature all around you. And this is a meditation that you can use just before you're going to be doing something, and just to remind to take the power of God into whatever you do, and to be able to direct and channel that energy to what you're doing, and to bless the world around you and stay in touch with that. Visualize a ray of the infinite light flowing into you from behind, through your medulla oblongata, at the base of the brain. Let it flow into your body and activate everything you do and say. God, remember, is in all things the real doer. Meditating on this thought will help you to realize its truth. Feel the divine ray flowing into and through your body. Concentrate especially on the forward flow of that energy to the point of superconscious awareness between the eyebrows. Then imagine it flowing out into the world through the spiritual eye, blessing others, blessing your surroundings, and blessing the whole world.